The dealership lobby smells faintly of roasted coffee and synthetic leather, a carefully curated environment engineered from the ground up to lower your psychological defenses. They slide a sleek tablet across the polished desk, highlighting a monthly payment that comfortably nestles into your current cash flow. They look you in the eye and assure you that this pristine new vehicle is a necessary, responsible upgrade for your family's safety and your own peace of mind. That single digital signature is, mathematically speaking, one of the most devastating blows you can deliver to your future wealth preservation. We are navigating an era of profound systemic erosion. The purchasing power of the American middle class is quietly draining away, not through sudden, catastrophic events, but through 1,000 tiny, highly normalized financial cuts. Yet the societal script you were handed hasn't changed. You are still being fed an outdated, toxic narrative that equates a shiny driveway with genuine financial stability. The reality? That new vehicle is a silent predator, methodically chewing through your retirement timeline. It is the ultimate hidden trap, brilliantly disguised as a responsible, safe middle-class choice. We need to understand the deep psychological manipulation at play before we even touch the math. Have you ever walked into a supermarket just to grab a gallon of milk, only to walk out an hour later with a cart full of premium groceries, wondering where half your weekly budget just vanished? That exact same behavioral science, the precise engineering of floor layout, strategic lighting, and perceived urgency to bypass your logical brain, is weaponized on a massive, terrifying scale in the automotive industry. They are not simply selling you transportation, they are selling you a cognitive anesthetic to numb the underlying anxiety of an uncertain economic future. They are selling you the illusion of control. Let's ground this in reality. Consider David and Linda, a 58-year-old couple living in Ohio. Between them, they pull in $145,000 a year. They've played by the rules. Their 401k nest egg sits at a respectable $650,000. They are eyeing the finish line, counting down the years to Medicare eligibility. One Tuesday, their reliable 10-year-old Sedan suddenly needs a $2,500 transmission repair. The panic sets in. The rationalization immediately begins. "We've worked hard. We deserve a reliable vehicle for our twilight years," David says. "Let's just trade it in and finance that premium German SUV we've always wanted. We can easily afford the $900 monthly payment." They genuinely believe they are making a mature, safe choice to avoid a $2,500 repair bill. Instead, they just strapped a $75,000 anvil to their retirement portfolio. What David and Linda do not see, what the dealership actively and aggressively obscures, is the compounding opportunity cost. They are pulling prime capital away from their index funds at the exact moment their portfolio needs maximum compounding momentum to outpace future healthcare inflation. Furthermore, they aren't factoring in the brutal depreciation curve of modern luxury vehicles, especially as the global market wrestles with the highly volatile transition between traditional combustion engines and electric vehicles. A massive chunk of that vehicle's value will evaporate the moment its tires touch public asphalt. They just traded years of future freedom for heated massage seats. Or look at Tommy. He is 35 years old, a hard-working guy who spends his weekends on DIY home renovations, usually sporting a faded green cotton t-shirt covered in sawdust and drywall dust. Tommy makes $85,000 a year and prides himself on being practical, but the unrelenting societal pressure to project success eventually gets to him. He trades in his perfectly functional older truck for a brand new $65,000 rig simply because the dealer offered a heavily subsidized interest rate. Tommy thinks he outsmarted the system. He didn't outsmart anything. He just signed a binding legal contract that will force him to work an extra 4 to 5 years of his life to break even on the capital he just vaporized. We must pull back and look at the historical context to understand why this trap is so uniquely lethal today. If you look back to the late 1990s, a new car cost a fraction of a family's median annual income. You financed it for 36 months, paid it off quickly, and drove it for a decade without a car payment hanging over your head. Fast forward to 2026, the financial industry has successfully normalized 72-month and even 84-month auto loans. You are essentially financing a rapidly decaying liability for the length of a short-term real estate mortgage. This is happening against the backdrop of a massive generational paradigm shift. Traditional pensions, the guaranteed corporate safety nets that allowed previous generations to make suboptimal consumption choices without facing destitution, are functionally dead. We have transitioned entirely to a defined contribution model. Your 401k, your Roth IRA, your health savings account, these are entirely your responsibility. The burden of wealth preservation is placed squarely on your shoulders. Yet the marketing machines of Detroit, Stuttgart, and Toyota are still aggressively pushing 1980s consumption habits onto a 2020s economic reality. This isn't just about a depreciating asset. It is about the systemic diversion of your life energy. Every dollar that leaves your personal ecosystem to fund a rapidly decaying piece of metal is a dollar that cannot compound, cannot generate dividends, and cannot protect you when the broader macroeconomic environment shifts.
Let us strip away the emotion, the marketing, and the manufactured desire and look exclusively at the unyielding mathematics of systemic wealth erosion. To understand exactly why this transaction is a disaster for your retirement, we have to perform a painstaking variable-by-variable autopsy on the actual numbers. The automotive industry desperately wants you to fixate on one single metric, the monthly payment. But as a pragmatic architect of your own wealth, you must view this transaction through the lens of total capital destruction, starting before the money even leaves your bank account. We must begin with the gross income trap, which is perhaps the most misunderstood mathematical reality in the American middle class. When you agree to a $1,000 monthly car payment, you are not actually spending $1,000. You are paying with post-tax dollars. Let us assume you are in the 24% federal tax bracket. You also have to factor in the 7.65% FICA tax for Social Security and Medicare. And let us assume a modest state income tax of around 4%. You are losing roughly 35% of every marginal dollar you earn to the IRS and state authorities. To physically put $1,000 into the hands of the auto lender every month, you must generate over $1,530 in gross income. That translates to more than $18,300 of your hard-earned annual salary, dedicated purely to servicing a depreciating asset. Think about the physical hours of your life, the stress at your job, the time away from your family, required simply to satisfy the tax burden on that car payment. Now, let us examine the asset itself. You are not buying a simple mechanical machine anymore. We are in the middle of a highly volatile global transition in automotive technology. Whether you are financing a premium European luxury SUV or a high-end domestic electric vehicle, you are essentially buying a massive rolling computer, and computers have a brutal, uncompromising depreciation curve. If you finance a $75,000 vehicle, the historical data dictates that you will lose roughly 20% of its value the second you drive it off the lot. That's $15,000 of your net worth vaporized in the time it takes to drive home. But the bleeding does not stop there. The secondary market is currently ruthless. Because of the rapid obsolescence of EV battery technology and the exorbitant cost of proprietary sensors and software in modern combustion vehicles, that $75,000 car will likely be worth around $30,000 in 5 years. You have just absorbed $45,000 in pure capital decay. Next, we factor in the Federal Reserve and the cost of capital. We are no longer living in the zero interest rate environment of the 2010s. The days of 0% promotional financing are functionally dead for anything you actually want to drive. Let us say you secure a 72-month loan and a highly competitive 7.5% interest rate on a $65,000 financed balance. Over the life of that 6-year loan, you are going to hand the bank nearly $16,000 in pure interest. You did not buy a $65,000 car. You bought an $81,000 car that will be worth $30,000 by the time you finally receive the physical title in the mail. And then comes the hidden systemic inflation that no one accounts for: insurance and maintenance monopolies. Because modern vehicles are packed with complex LiDAR sensors, integrated cameras, and specialized battery enclosures, even a minor fender bender can result in a catastrophic repair bill. The insurance industry has responded by skyrocketing premiums. You are easily paying an extra $150 to $200 a month in excess insurance premiums simply for the privilege of driving new technology compared to a fully depreciated 10-year-old vehicle. This brings us to the ultimate kill shot: compounding opportunity cost. This is the math that determines whether you retire with dignity at 62 or whether you are forced to grind away in a corporate cubicle until you are 70. Let us take that $1,000 monthly car payment plus the $150 excess insurance premium. That's $1,150 of prime investable capital. If you had taken that $1,150 every month for those 72 months and systematically deployed it into a broad market S&P 500 index fund, let us assume a historically conservative 8% annualized return, you would accumulate roughly $107,000 by the end of year 6. But the mathematics of wealth preservation operate on a longer timeline. Let us assume you stop contributing after year 6 because you theoretically paid off the car. If you simply leave that $107,000 invested and never add another dime for the next 14 years, allowing it to compound in the background while you live your life, it grows to over $314,000. Look at the spread. Look at the brutal, unvarnished reality of the decision. On one side, you have a 20-year-old heavily degraded vehicle with a scrap value of maybe $5,000. On the other side, you have $314,000 in liquid, wealth-generating capital. That massive sum of money represents roughly 4 to 6 years of total living expenses for the average American retiree. When you sit in that dealership and sign that financing agreement, you are not just buying a car, you are actively choosing to trade half a decade of your future financial freedom, half a decade of your retirement, for a temporary dopamine hit that will wear off before the first oil change. Wall Street and the automotive industry have partnered to extract the maximum amount of your future labor, and they are using your own desire for status to facilitate the transfer.
If we have established that the mathematics of buying a new car are unequivocally disastrous for your long-term wealth preservation, we must confront a far more uncomfortable question. Why do highly intelligent, capable Americans continually walk straight into this trap? You balance your household budget, you understand how to manage a mortgage, you likely possess a high degree of professional competence in your career. Yet, when presented with the intoxicating allure of a modern dealership showroom, the logical, analytical centers of the brain simply shut down. To understand this phenomenon, we must conduct a psychological autopsy of the modern American consumer. We are fighting against an invisible, multi-billion-dollar apparatus that has spent decades studying human behavioral psychology, specifically designed to bypass your rational defenses. Let us look at Sarah. She is a 48-year-old regional director of operations in Chicago. In her professional life, she is ruthless with numbers. She manages a $12 million corporate budget, fiercely negotiating every vendor contract to preserve her company's profit margins. She is a data-driven powerhouse. But in her personal life, Sarah drives an $85,000 imported luxury crossover financed over 7 years. The disconnect is staggering. How does a woman who fights for pennies in the boardroom willingly hemorrhage tens of thousands of dollars in her own driveway?
The answer lies in the deep-seated normalization of systemic debt. Sarah's peer group, her fellow executives, her neighbors in the suburbs, the people she interacts with daily, all carry massive auto loans. When everyone around you is quietly drowning in $1,200 monthly payments, drowning begins to feel like the baseline human condition. It ceases to look like a financial crisis and starts to look like the standard cost of admission to the American middle class. This is the modern iteration of keeping up with the Joneses. It is no longer just about competing with the neighbor across the fence. It is a pervasive digital and physical environment that equates your societal worth with the metal box you commute in. But the psychological manipulation goes much deeper than simple status signaling. The auto industry understands that smart people need to construct logical alibis for their emotional purchases. They need a rational justification to present to their spouses and, more importantly, to themselves. Enter the safety illusion. This is arguably the most potent cognitive bias exploited by modern marketing. You will hear an otherwise rational 50-year-old say, "I am buying this brand new oversized SUV because my family's safety is my top priority." They convince themselves that their perfectly functional, meticulously maintained 7-year-old sedan is suddenly a lethal liability because it lacks the absolute latest proprietary lane departure software. This is cognitive dissonance in its purest form. The statistical difference in crash survivability between a well-built 2018 vehicle and a 2026 model is microscopically thin. You are not spending $50,000 for safety. You are spending $50,000 to mask a status purchase under the noble guise of parental or familial responsibility. Then we must dismantle the deserve trap. This is an ideological virus inherited directly from outdated mid-century financial advice. You work a grueling 50-hour week. You navigate high-stress corporate environments. You feel the squeeze of broader economic pressures. The emotional relief valve becomes, "I work hard, I deserve a nice car." You use the vehicle as a therapeutic reward to offset the misery of your daily grind. But the brutal reality of the 21st century economy is that you do not deserve a rapidly depreciating liability that chains you to your desk for an extra 5 years. You deserve genuine financial autonomy. You deserve the ability to weather a sudden market correction without panic. A leather-wrapped steering wheel is a very poor substitute for true economic freedom. We also have to address the sophisticated edge cases, particularly those who think they are outsmarting the system using the tax code. You will frequently hear high-income earners or small business owners argue, "But my CPA said I can use Section 179 to write off the entire purchase of this heavy SUV against my business income." This is the classic trap of letting the tax wag the financial dog. Yes, utilizing tax deductions is a critical component of wealth preservation, but spending $100,000 on a heavy luxury vehicle just to save $35,000 in tax liability means you still permanently parted with $65,000 of capital that you didn't need to spend. You didn't beat the system, you just took a slightly discounted path to capital destruction. Ultimately, this is a battle of emotional regulation. Your brain is evolved for immediate tribal signaling, demonstrating your success to the pack right now. It is incredibly poorly equipped to conceptualize the abstract delayed gratification required to fund a Roth IRA or build a dividend portfolio for a retirement that is 15 years away. The media, the marketing agencies, and the financial institutions exploit this biological vulnerability every single day. They associate their vehicles with freedom, rugged individualism, and professional arrival. But the math proves the exact opposite. That vehicle is not freedom. It is an invisible cage constructed entirely of compounding interest and monthly direct debits.
We have diagnosed the systemic disease, and we have dismantled the psychological illusions keeping the middle class trapped. Now, we execute the surgical intervention. Theory is useless without execution. This is the strategic masterclass. This is exactly what you are going to do when you wake up on Monday morning to reclaim your financial autonomy. We are shifting from passive consumers to ruthless capital allocators. First, we must execute the tactical extraction. If you are currently driving a fully paid-off, mechanically sound vehicle, your primary directive is absolute defense. You do not walk onto a dealership lot. You do not browse automotive inventory online. You meticulously maintain the machine you have. But what if you are already trapped? What if you are currently sitting on an $800 monthly payment on a depreciating asset? You need to calculate your negative equity immediately. Let us look at Robert, a 52-year-old mechanical engineer in Michigan. Robert was carrying a $950 payment on a heavy-duty pickup truck he used to haul landscaping supplies maybe twice a year. He realized he was trading his 50s for a piece of steel. He ran the numbers. He owed $42,000 on a truck that the secondary market valued at $38,000. Instead of hiding from the math, Robert absorbed the pain. He sold the truck, took out a $4,000 unsecured personal loan to cover the underwater spread, and bought a cosmetically flawed but mechanically bulletproof 2015 Toyota RAV4 for $12,000 cash. He took a calculated short-term hit to permanently sever a massive arterial bleed in his monthly cash flow. Once you sever that auto loan, you do not simply absorb that reclaimed capital back into your general checking account. That is exactly how lifestyle creep destroys your margins. You must instantly establish the ghost payment ecosystem. If you were paying $800 to a captive auto lender, you immediately set up an automated $800 electronic draft to your own brokerage account. The capital leaves your primary operating account on the exact same day of the month it used to. You mentally live as if you still have an oppressive car payment, but you are now financing your own early retirement. To execute this properly, you need total visibility on your cash flow. I personally use the wealth tracking dashboard linked in the description below to automate these ghost payments and meticulously track my compounding dividends. Set it up today. Now, where exactly does this ghost payment go? We do not speculate. We do not chase dividend yield traps or highly volatile sector funds. We deploy this capital systematically into tax-advantaged vessels. If you are in your 40s or 50s, your largest looming liability is not housing, it is future healthcare costs. Therefore, your first target is a health savings account, or HSA, assuming you have a qualifying high-deductible health plan. An HSA is the most potent wealth preservation tool in the U.S. tax code because it is triple tax advantaged. The money goes in pre-tax, it compounds tax-free, and it comes out tax-free for qualified medical expenses. You funnel your ghost payment into that HSA until it hits the annual IRS contribution limit. Once the HSA is capped, the overflow is aggressively routed into a Roth IRA, specifically targeting low-cost, broad-market S&P 500 index funds. You are shifting your money from an asset that guarantees a 20% loss in year one into a basket of the 500 greatest wealth-generating companies in the American economy. Let us address the edge cases. What if your transmission literally exploded yesterday? Fixing it costs more than the vehicle is worth, and public transit is simply not an option in your rural county. What if you are forced to buy a vehicle right now? Here's the uncompromising blueprint. You buy in cash. If purchasing in cash is mathematically impossible without draining your emergency fund, you adapt the 20-3-8 rule, specifically optimized for defensive wealth preservation. You put down a minimum of 20% in cash to instantly insulate yourself against first-year depreciation. You finance the balance for no longer than 3 years, 36 months, and your total automotive footprint, which means the monthly payment plus your elevated insurance premiums, absolutely cannot exceed 8% of your gross monthly household income. If a vehicle does not fit those rigid parameters, you cannot afford it. Period. The math does not care about your daily commute, and the math does not care about your desire for a quiet cabin. The math only cares about capital allocation. If you have to step down 2 trim levels or buy a domestic sedan with 50,000 miles on the odometer instead of a premium import, that's the calculated sacrifice you make to defend your nest egg.
We have covered the brutal mathematics of depreciation. We have dissected the psychological warfare deployed by the automotive industry, and we have laid out the exact tactical blueprint to extract yourself from this trap. But to truly harden your mindset against the relentless marketing machine of the American consumer economy, we have to look past next month's budget. We have to look at the extended horizon. We need to look 10, 15, and 20 years down the line, because the financial decisions you make in a brightly lit dealership showroom today will echo directly into your twilight years. Let us project two distinctly different futures. Consider James and Elena. They are currently 45 and 43 years old. They are at the peak of their earning potential, but they are also feeling the immense pressure of inflation, property taxes, and the looming reality of funding their golden years. In the first timeline, they succumb to the normalization of systemic debt. They decide that their slightly weathered 10-year-old sedan doesn't reflect their current professional status, so they finance a $75,000 luxury SUV. They accept a $900 monthly payment, rationalizing it as a necessary expense. Fast forward 20 years, James is 65. The physical toll of decades in the corporate grind is catching up with him. He wants to step away, or at least transition to part-time consulting, but he can't. In this timeline, they have continuously rolled from one expensive auto loan to the next, constantly resetting the clock on their debt. Because they siphoned nearly $1,000 a month out of their ecosystem for 2 decades, their retirement accounts are dangerously underfunded. When an unexpected medical event occurs, or when their property tax assessment spikes, they experience sheer, unadulterated panic. They are trapped in the workforce, highly vulnerable to corporate downsizing, entirely because they chose to prioritize a depreciating piece of sheet metal over their own future autonomy. Now look at the second timeline. James and Elena absorb the friction. They detail their old sedan, replace the worn floor mats, and drive it for another 7 years. They take that exact same $900 monthly allocation and aggressively deploy it into broad market index funds and their health savings accounts. Fast forward 20 years, James is 65. They haven't just accumulated a massive pool of compounding capital, they have bought back their own timeline. When the corporate environment becomes toxic, James simply hands in his resignation. He does not ask for permission to retire, he dictates his own terms. He and Elena have the liquid wealth to cover their Medicare premiums, travel without anxiety, and weather any macroeconomic storms. The car they drive is entirely irrelevant because their self-worth is anchored in their financial fortress, not in their driveway. This is the absolute core of wealth preservation. You are not just saving dollars, you are purchasing future physical energy. Now, I want to be entirely transparent with you before we look at the broader economic horizon. I'm just a guy on the internet sharing my deep dive research and personal observations. You should always consult a fiduciary, a certified financial planner, or a qualified tax professional before making major structural moves with your portfolio. My goal is to arm you with the data the system actively tries to hide from you, so you can ask those professionals the right questions. And you need to be asking those hard questions right now, because the systemic safety nets of the 20th century are fracturing. You cannot rely on outdated boomer-era financial assumptions. We have to address the massive elephant in the room: Social Security. According to the most recent projections from the Board of Trustees, the combined trust funds that pay Social Security benefits are on a trajectory toward depletion by the mid-2030s. If legislative intervention does not occur, benefits could face an automatic reduction of 20% or more. If you are a Gen X or elder millennial viewer, you have to plan for a reality where the government safety net is significantly compromised. What happens if you are carrying an absurd, prolonged auto loan into your 60s and simultaneously your projected Social Security income is slashed by a fifth? What happens if healthcare inflation continues to outpace core inflation, making supplemental Medicare plans prohibitively expensive? If you are dumping your prime wealth-generating capital into a depreciating liability, you are leaving yourself completely exposed to these macroeconomic risks. You are betting your physical comfort in old age on the hope that the Federal Reserve and the government will somehow fix the system before you need it. That is not a strategy. That is a gamble, and the house always wins. When you choose to keep your perfectly functional older vehicle, when you reject the societal pressure to finance a rolling computer that you do not need, you are taking an incredibly powerful, defiant stance. You are actively breaking the generational cycle of consumer debt. You are building an impenetrable wall around your family's future.
The automotive industry has spent billions of dollars to convince you that their product is the ultimate symbol of American freedom. But true freedom doesn't have a monthly payment attached to it. True freedom doesn't require comprehensive insurance and a dealer warranty. True freedom is the ability to wake up on a Tuesday morning, look at your brokerage account, and realize that your money is working harder than you are. Stop funding Wall Street's balance sheet. Stop financing the lavish architecture of modern dealerships. Reclaim your labor, protect your capital, and build the kind of quiet, stoic wealth that outlasts any market cycle. The math is brutal, but the math is also the key to your independence. The choice is yours. Choose wisely.
Stepping confidently.